Sociocast presents coverage of the 2019 election for the presidency and vice presidency of the American Sociological Association. I'm Joseph Cohen from Queen's College. To give voters a better sense of the candidates, we asked the four major office candidates to answer 7 questions about the discipline, the association, and their vision for both. To hear the other candidates, visit www.sociocast.org/ASA 2019. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Okay, we're here with Rhacel Salazar-Parrenas, a professor of sociology and gender studies at the University of Southern California in Dornsife College. She is a vice presidential candidate for the American Sociological Association. Thank you for meeting with us.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk about my work today.
Could you please begin by telling us a bit about your work?
So I am a qualitative sociologist who has primarily done research concerning women's labor migration in economic globalization. And so I'm situated in various subfields in sociology. That would be labor, gender, international migration, sexuality, and economic sociology. So empirically, I have primarily focused on labor migration from the Philippines, particularly of women, as they constitute one of the largest flows of labor migration in the world today. And they are primarily leaving to become domestic workers all over the world, actually, to more than 100 countries, but they are primarily concentrated in the region we call the Middle East. So I have been doing this work for nearly 2 decades. And my first set of research looked at migrant domestic workers, primarily in Western countries. And then and one of the biggest findings I had early in my career was that many of them are mothers, these domestic workers, and then they leave their children behind in the country of origin. And so then I did a follow-up study looking at how gender shapes the lives of the children who are left behind, particularly like what are gender relations, what is the household division of labor when in transnational families, when a mother leaves or a father leaves to be a migrant worker somewhere, or when both parents leave. And then since then, I've turned to looking at the question of human trafficking, because labor migrants are, those most vulnerable to being trafficked. And so I've looked at 2 groups that have been identified as trafficked persons by the U.S. Department of State, and that first are Filipino migrant hostesses in Japan, and then my current project looks at Southeast Asian migrant domestic workers in the United Arab Emirates.
In your opinion, what do sociologists do? What's our role in society? What's the purpose of our profession?
This is going to sound so obvious, but I do think of sociologists as, quote unquote, intellectuals who help us better understand social interactions and how these social interactions are shaped by larger structural forces that, go beyond sort of what you see in your everyday life. And so I do think, that we have a very important role in society that I think when people I think one of our biggest roles in society is to bring to the forefront how there are these larger, structural systems and, factors that shape people's lives, that go outside of beyond individual will. And then I think non-sociologists just look at people, right? Like independent of any kind of structural force, that everything is just done by will, meritocracy, and people don't take into account how people have different opportunities. Why do people have different opportunities? What do these different opportunities then do to, what are the impacts of these different opportunities to people? Yeah, so I think, that's what one of our main jobs is.
In your view, what's the ASA's job? Whom does it serve, and what does it do? What's its role in the discipline?
So I do think that the ASA is a very important institution because that brings us together, sociologists together, um, once a year. So when I think of the ASA, I primarily think of the meeting that we have in August, and I think of that meeting as a place where it's a great place for learning, like from other people, in terms of looking at what our colleagues have identified as really important, pressing social issues. So I see, the meeting that ASA puts together as a really important learning place for me. But I also see ASA as an organization that represents us when there are important, social issues that affect particularly American society, right? When there are sort of huge, so like I appreciate it when the president, for example, will release a statement on behalf of the membership about some political or social issue that is kind of important to us.
What is your sense of the biggest issues facing our discipline? Do you have ideas about how to engage them?
So in terms of the biggest issues facing our discipline, I think that there is this question of legitimacy vis-a-vis like the public, where sociologists are dismissed as like biased liberals. And so I think that that sort of stereotype of college professors that her the right wing media like puts out there, I think is directed to sociologists and delegitimizes our work. And so I think that's one pressing issue. And so then I think, to address that issue, that's why it's really important that sociologists do what they do and do it well, which is that we don't just, make claims based on our opinions, but that the claims we make are often substantiated by very rigorous, like by data that we collected using very rigorous methods. So I think it's like really important that we continue to do that, so that when we do make claims, we are like very confident about them, and that we know we can't really be dismissed as just these like liberals who are just like making claims based on their opinions. And so that's like one problem that I think we face in our discipline. And then a second one that doesn't really affect me because I'm in a department that's we nicely coexist, but people feel in this discipline intern. Now this is the internal issue, which is like this conflict between quantitative versus qualitative, and what is more legitimate or not. But I, to be honest, I know that that's an issue. But to be honest, at USC, this has not been much of an issue for us, and that we really have mutual respect for each other and look at each other's um, methods as necessary to provide a holistic picture of the social issues we are addressing.
I solicited questions from colleagues
Okay.
who I interact with on social media, and here are three that were chosen for this election. So here's the first question from colleagues: If you are elected, what goals will motivate your vice presidency? What will be distinct about the ASA under your guidance?
One of my goals is to internationalize our discipline, not just like from the membership, from the basis of membership, but also just really foregrounding works that look at sociological issues more at a global stage. And so really trying to figure out how we can promote students and our colleagues doing our faculty doing more like international based research, and looking at how a lot of US based works, how we could look at those from a different lens if we take into account experiences that occur outside of this country. um, another priority of mine is to help make the ASA meetings a more welcoming place for underrepresented scholars. And, I speak as someone who has been strongly committed to, um, working towards diversifying higher education. And I've done that primarily through my work as a liaison for the Ford Fellowship Program, which has that mission. And so I've been a liaison for them since 2007.
Do you think the claims of a divide in sociology between the dispassionate empiricists and activism, do you think it's accurate or do you think it's overstated? And do you think that talking about this divide is generative and productive or is it divisive? And what will you do to make everyone feel more represented within the Big Ten?
Okay. I think of this divide between dispassionate empiricism and activism as actually, it's not, you could make that argument, but it's not a productive argument to be made. I really think of us as coexisting in within a continuum. So I don't see these as like two polar opposites that are, mutually exclusive, but I see them as necessarily coexisting. I think that many sociologists are motivated to do their work because they see how various inequalities shape all of our experiences. And we have, I think, generally this shared commitment, and people have different comfort levels about how they can use their work towards addressing these issues of inequality. Do they want to sort of indirectly or directly work towards eradicating them? And so I'll just give you an example. I was testifying at the U.S. Civil Rights Commission on this problem, quote unquote, problem of sex trafficking. And then at the end of my testimony, of everyone's testimony, um, members of the commission asked me for my solutions. And I actually told them that I didn't have any solutions and that my role, I mean, because I really actually didn't have any solutions. And I sort of saw this as probably the most embarrassing moment of my career. But then after I stepped back, I realized, and this is what I told them, it's like not my job to come up with solutions. Like I'm an academic and my job is to tell you what the problem is and to help you understand the problem. And you guys are the politicians. You're the ones who's supposed to come up with a solution, right? And so then it's interesting. You could say that that experience puts me in between dispassionate empiricism and activism. But I really think it's like the context in which you're operating in that will determine how you utilize your research to address issues of inequality. So I think it's really important that we move away from this sort of bipolar construction of these two and look at them as part of a larger continuum in which we are all committed towards addressing issues of social inequality.
Sociologists are concerned about inequality, and we know that a lot of inequality exists in our discipline. Virtually everything we do is suffused with inequality, and some argue unfairness. The teaching we deliver our undergraduates, access to good graduate programs, opportunities to get good faculty jobs, access to research money and platform, and so on. Which inequalities within sociology concern you, and do you have ideas about how to engage it?
So this is like a very broad question that I think doesn't just affect sociologists, but affects people in higher ed in general. And so, in my experience in higher education and in various committees that I have been a member of, I mean, I definitely see, God, many problems, but let me just say, there is a gender wage gap that people have found to be consistent between men and women. And it has been said that this wage gap starts in the beginning, in which men will have a slightly higher starting offer than women, and that this starting offer then is so important because then it follows us, right? So every raise that we have from that point on, unless we have a counter offer, is a percentage of that initial salary that we have. And so I think that's just like one problem, and that of course you address that by making sure that people's starting salary is not hugely you know different, right? um Other issues is that again it's an issue of balancing work and family, and this issue of childcare and getting time off, and extending your tenure clock. Studies have repeatedly shown that women are not benefiting from the extension of their tenure clock, but that men who can use then the same extension of the tenure clock when when they have a child, benefit more from this policy. So that's like another issue that we have to that affects people in higher education. And do I have ideas about how to engage it? I think I'm starting by like actually articulating the problem, and that this is a problem that schools, various schools, should continuously address when they look at their tenure and promotion process.
This has been Sociocast's coverage of the 2019 ASA presidential and vice presidential elections. For more, go to sociocast.org/ASA 2019. Our producer is Liseth Moreno. I'm Joe Cohen. Thanks for listening.